Hello there, watching Al24 Midnight Newsroom live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. Algeria launched the African Nations Championship for home-based players with a remarkable ceremony reflecting Algeria's continental attachment and its hospitality values. The host and the title favourites Algeria edged Libya 1-0 on Friday in the opening match of the 2022 African Nations Championship Chad. And a visit marks Japan's increase in military posturing amid concerns about China. President Biden welcomes Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the White House. A Greek court on the island of Lesbos dismissed charges on Friday against 25 migrant rescue activists following a lengthy legal battle that has been slammed by human rights groups. Hello and welcome. Starting from Algeria, Algerian Prime Minister Ayman Ben Abdulrahman supervised the inauguration of the opening ceremony of the 2022 African Cup of Nations for home-based players hosted here in Algeria in the newly built stadium Nelson Mandela Baraki, which saw the presence of FIFA President Gianni Infantino and the President of the African Football Federation. The ceremony lasted about half an hour, during which paintings were displayed reflecting the nobility of Algeria's and Africa's cultural heritage. In the same line of thought, the grandson of the African icon Nelson Mandela said in a letter to the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, that naming the new stadium after his grandfather is a symbol of the deep-rooted relationship between South Africa and Algeria. The grandson of Mandela said that his grandfather regarded Algeria as his second home and the home of all revolutionaries on the African continent. The works of the 60th Conference of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Western Sahara will begin shortly in the state of Dakhla in the Sahrawi refugee camp, with the participation of about 2,000 delegates and participants, in addition to foreign delegations. The conference is held over the course of 5 days in special circumstances characterized by the resumption of the armed struggle after Morocco's violation of the ceasefire agreement on the 30th of November 2020. Still in the African continent, Ethiopia's army said forces from the Amara region who fought in support of the federal government during the two-year war in neighboring Tigray have withdrawn from major Tigray city in line with the African Union-backed ceasefire. The withdrawal of Amhara forces and Eritrean troops who also supported Ethiopia's army is a key condition of the November truce, as is demilitarization of Tigrayan forces, who began to hand over the heavy weapons on Wednesday. French and German foreign ministers called on the African Union to support reforms in the UN Security Council that would increase its permanent seats and allocate 2 seats for Africa. Hussein Burkan on what's follow.
Germany Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and her French counterpart Katharina Colonna traveled to Adama in Ethiopia on Thursday to inspect stores of grain delivered from Europe. Annalena Baerbock announced her support and that of Katharina Colonna, French Foreign Minister, for the creation of 2 permanent seats on the Security Council for the African continent. Katharina Colonna added that France is also in favor of making room for the African Union and the G20.
So Katrina and I were underlining that we also as European partners, that I as a German foreign ministers, we see that the world in 2023 is not the world after the Second World War. And therefore we are supporting 2 permanent seats in the Security Council, also for the African continent.
Both ministers were in the country to vote their government support for rebuilding the war-affected areas in Ethiopia, which started in 2020. A peace agreement was signed between the warrant parties at the end of last year.
Bringing electricity to people, helping agriculture to get going again in regions that need it, that's going to change people's lives. We would really like aid to be able to be delivered quickly now, simply to make people feel that the peace dividends are there.
The ministers met with Deputy Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Demeke Mekonnen, and pledged to ease the effects of the war in the Tigray and Amhara regions.
This is a new chapter. This is time to settle our internal crisis and focus on our development and transformation. It is time to our partners to support this country while managing emerging economy, demanding society with different challenges and problems.
Also on the agenda was the subject of rising food prices being exacerbated by a Russian operation in Ukraine and the climate crisis. This joint trip by the two ministers is also symbolic before the celebration on January 22nd of the 16th anniversary of the Elysee Treaty, sealing Franco-German reconciliation.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz received Iraq Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, who took office last October. Chancellor of Germany Olaf Scholz has been in favor of buying gas and oil from Iraq to avoid depending on individual suppliers. For the German Chancellor, Iraq is a very important cooperation partner, and not only for Germany, since the imported fuel could later be exported to other European countries.
Unlike in the past, we will not depend on individual suppliers, but we will be mobilize many others and cooperate closely with them. And Iraq would be a very welcome cooperation partner for us in importing gas and oil to Germany.
To date, there has been no investment in the energy sector. We are trying to make progress in this area. Accordingly, we offered during our visit today that German companies invest in these areas, that they can also show a presence in Iraq if they want to.
In the Middle East, 3 Palestinians were killed Thursday during a Zionist raid in the occupied West Bank. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, it is Samir Aouni Harbi Aslan, a 41-year-old, killed after a bullet fired by Zionist occupation army passed through his chest. 2 other Palestinians, Habib Abdul Rahman, 25 years, and Abdel Hadi Nazil, 18, were killed by Zionist live ammunition in the town of Qabtiya near the northern West Bank city of Jenin. During his visit to Lebanon, Iran's Foreign Minister Hussein Abdullahian said on Friday his country was glad to see a rapprochement between its allies Syria and Turkey, which has backed the political and armed opposition to Damascus over the last decade. Amir Abdullahian will travel to Damascus on Saturday, 14th of January, for talks with Syrian counterparts, according to pro-government Syrian daily Al-Watan.
We are happy with the dialogue between Syria and Turkey and the meetings between the leaders of the two countries. We believe that this dialogue should have positive repercussions for the benefits of these two countries. I think the best way to move forward on the issue of Syrian-Turkish relations would be to engage in the Astana process while considering Syrian representation.
Opening the door now to Europe, Greek court on Lesbos dismissed espionage charges on Friday against a group of aid workers on trial and ordered a prosecutor to refile the case.
After Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights asked the Greek court to drop all charges against humanitarian aid workers whose trial took place on the island of Lesbos, Greek court on Friday rejected charges against the group, relying on procedural grounds to return the case to the prosecutions for refiling.
We reiterate our call for charges against the 24 to be dismissed. The charges are in connection with their actions in rescuing migrants at sea and include several alleged misdemeanors related to the facilitation of migrant smuggling.
The case in which 17 foreigners and 7 Greeks were accused by Greek justice of espionage over their work with migrants has drawn widespread criticism for human rights organizations.
Saving lives and providing humanitarian assistance should never be criminalized or prosecuted. Such actions are, quite simply, a humanitarian and human rights imperative.
The defendants have argued they were doing nothing more than assisting people whose lives were at risk.
If this same tactic gets deployed again for the felony trial, which we're still waiting to happen, it's 15 more years of waiting, of errors. All we want is justice. We want this to go to trial.
The court accepted objections by defense lawyers that the prosecution had failed to adhere to proper procedure in filing the charges. The defense lawyers successfully argued that the prosecution documents had not been translated for the foreign defendants and that the espionage charges were vague.
We realized what we were shouting for the last 4 years. So there are still many things to be done in order to reach the final step, which is the felonies that are still ongoing and the investigation is still in process.
Tens of thousands of people fleeing war, violence and poverty have entered Greece, Italy and Spain seeking refuge in the European Union. Greece's conservative government, in power since 2019, has vowed to make Greece an unattractive destination for all types of migrants.
Russian Defense Ministry said Friday that its troops have taken control of the town of Solidar in the eastern region of Donetsk. According to the same source, the capture of the salt mining city of Solidar, where intense fighting has been taking place in recent weeks, will cut off the supply routes of Ukrainian troops in neighboring Bakhmut and encircle Kiev forces in that city.
On the evening of January 12, the liberation of Solidar was completed. The town is important for continuing the Russian advance on Donetsk axis. Taking full control of Solidar enabled Russia to cut off the Ukrainian forces' supplies in Bakhmut, which is located to the southwest from Solidar, and after that, to block and encircle the Ukrainian army divisions that remain there.
To the United States now, U.S. President Joe Biden told Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Friday that the United States remained strongly committed to its alliance with Japan and praised Tokyo's historic defense reforms. This comes after the two countries' leaders met in the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. Nabil Khazini.
The U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. witnessed high-level talks as President Joe Biden received the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the White House. Amid the growing pressure from China, Japan seeks to bolster partnership with allies in Europe and in North America, an alliance guaranteed by the U.S. President.
I'd be crystal clear. The United States is fully, thoroughly, completely committed to the alliance. And more importantly, to Japan's defense, the defense of Japan.
This is the first visit to Washington by the Japanese leader, whose country holds the presidency of the G7 countries this year. The Japanese Prime Minister put forward the new defense doctrine adopted in December and which provides a massive increase in the defense budget. However, Beijing said that the joint statement by the US-Japan Security Advisory Committee was full of baseless attacks on China.
We urge the United States and Japan to abandon their Cold War mentality and ideological bias. Stop creating imaginary enemies. Stop introducing a new Cold War mentality to the Asia-Pacific region. And refrain from being a countercurrent that disturbs the stability of the region.
Defense has dominated the Japanese Prime Minister's agenda this week as Kishida met with several group of 7 allies and signed a defense agreement with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Wednesday to strengthen military ties between the two countries.
To Peru now, following weeks of violence riots caused by the overthrow of former President Pedro Castillo, which have claimed at least 42 lives. Thousands of people protested peacefully against the new government in Lima, the capital of Peru, on Thursday. The march, which was planned by labor unions and socialist organizations, went off without hitch. The recent protests represent the deadliest violence in Peru in more than 20 years. Eduardo Garcia, the Minister of Labor, resigned during the demonstration, calling for the government to acknowledge that the mistakes have been made, calling for an apology for the deaths.
Miss Dina Balawart, be aware you're being used. Why are you turning your back on the people? There are so many deaths. For God's sake, stop this massacre. It's not fair. I know of people taking up streets to protest, and they are outraged like me. We are being accused of being terrorists, but we aren't terrorists.
We have just taken from the conflict zone, especially Julaica's hospital, 4 patients. All of them are between 17 and 35 years old. They have serious traumas.
Flames rose up to some 50 meters in the air after a gas pipeline connecting Lithuania and Latvia was hit by an explosion on Friday. Lithuania gas transmission operator said there was no immediate evidence of an attack. The supply of gas was cut off, but the CEO of the gas operator, or rather operation, said blast had damaged one of the 2 parallel pipelines sending gas from Lithuania to Latvia.
Well, I think we are talking about the technical failure. I mean, the pipeline itself is quite old. We're talking about the pipeline which is about 40 years old. So I think it's very likely that it's a technological failure. And of course, we cannot rule out other possibilities. But I think the main one is actually, as I said, it's a technical failure that we have to restore, and I think in the morning tomorrow we will already have those processes in place, and the pipeline will be restored in a few days.
And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup by Mohammed Khatel.
The leader of Sri Lanka's Catholic Church praised on Friday a Supreme Court decision to order the former president and 4 officials to pay compensation for the 2019 Easter Sunday bombings that killed more than 260 people. The church itself was not party to the lawsuit, but Cardinal Malcolm Rajint told reporters he hoped the case would be escalated against former President Maithripala Sirisena and his top security officials. On Thursday, the Supreme Court ordered Sirisena, his police chief, 2 senior intelligence officials and a senior defense ministry official to pay a total of $850,000 from their personal funds as compensation to the families of the victims of the bombings who had brought the civil case before the court. The court said the former president and his officials had failed to prevent the attack, which was one among the worst in Sri Lanka's turbulent history. 5 people suspected of transporting methamphetamines were killed following exchanges of fire with the Thai army near the border with Burma, an incident recurring in recent weeks according to a military statement. This is the 3rd time in almost a month that Thai soldiers have killed people suspected of smuggling drugs in this region. More than 1 billion methamphetamine pills, or 172 tons, were seized in 2021 in East and South of Asia, a record high according to data from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC. Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum announced on Thursday the deployment of over 6,000 National Guard members to stations and other facilities of the capital's metro system after a series of incidents she described as unusual. The National Guard members will be in the metro for a few months, aiding surveillance and security, and could stay there permanently pending later evaluation, Sheinbaum said. On January 7, a train crash killed 1 woman and injured 57 others. The accident followed the May 2021 collapse of the rail overpass between 2 stations at Line 12 that killed 26 people. People have been evacuated from their homes in the Rhondda Valley amid widespread flooding in parts of Wales. This comes after the country was battered by torrential conditions overnight. Approximately 20 houses in Stone, Ferndale have been affected after half a month's worth of rain fell in the last 24 hours, with the South Wales valleys being the hardest hit. There were reports of flooding at around 5:30 a.m. on Thursday in Arfieran Terrace, Stone, according to South Wales Fire and Rescue Department. Rhondda Fash Leisure Centre is currently being used as an emergency rest centre for those residents affected by the flooding.
The European Union has announced it hopes to bolster its capacity to launch small satellites into space with the new launch pad in Arctic Sweden. European officials and Swedish King inaugurated the EU's first mainland orbital launch complex on Friday during a visit to Sweden by members of European Commission, the 27-nation bloc's executive arm.
The Commission will make a proposal for an EU space strategy for security and defence. The aim is to improve the resilience of the European space infrastructure and strengthen our shared European capabilities.
The current geopolitical situation, not least, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has demonstrated how important it is that the European Union has access to space. ESRA's unique geographical position and long service makes it ideal for launches of satellites in polar orbits and other space activities.
Ending up our news bulletin with the Chan News. Algeria defeated neighboring Libya 1-0 in the first match of the African Championship tournament, featuring home-based players. A tense game marked by a penalty goal in the second half by Ayman Mahyous, who shot on the left goalkeeper, scoring the first 3 points for the national team as it prepares to face Ethiopia on Wednesday. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And for now, all I can say, good night.